"Mom, who's that on the porch?" That's how it began. One question from a 6-year-old with jelly on her chin. Megan Weaver had only turned away for a second, just long enough to lift a box of cookware from the trunk. When she looked back at the porch, no one was there. Just her daughter, Lucy, squinting into the late afternoon sun. "There's nobody there, sweetie," Megan said. "Probably just a shadow." Lucy frowned. "No." She waved at me. It was July. Humid, sticky, hot enough to bake the paint off the porch rails. The Weavers had just moved into a century-old farmhouse on the edge of Cedar Hill, Louisiana. Population 3,812 and exactly one blinking streetlight. The house was a real find, according to the real estate agent. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch. The only catch: it sat 30 feet from the town cemetery. Cedar Hill Cemetery was older than the town itself. The land had once belonged to a church that burned down in the 1880s. Only the gravestones remained, some cracked, some sunken into the moss, but the graves kept growing in number. No one could explain why. History, the realtor said. That's all. But the locals didn't walk past the cemetery after sundown. And they definitely didn't buy the house next to it. The Weavers weren't local. Megan was a recent widow. Her husband, Mark, had died suddenly of a heart attack just after New Year's. She needed somewhere cheap, quiet, and far away from the noise of Atlanta. Somewhere her daughter could sleep through the night. Somewhere she might finally feel like breathing again. Cedar Hill offered all of that. At first, the house groaned like it remembered things. Floorboards sighed beneath every step, the windows whistled even when the air was still, and the stairs always creaked in sets of 3. Up and down. Never 4. Never 2. Always 3. By the 3rd night, Lucy had stopped sleeping in her room. "There's someone under my bed," she said. Megan lifted the frame, showed her there was nothing there, even let her crawl underneath to see for herself. "See," she said. "Nothing but dust bunnies." Lucy didn't argue. She just pointed at the floorboard directly under her bed. "That one whispers." That night, Megan heard it too. She was up late in the kitchen, sorting through unopened boxes, when she heard a soft scraping upstairs. She paused, waited, then footsteps. 3 slow steps across Lucy's bedroom, then silence. She climbed the stairs quickly. Lucy was asleep in Megan's bed, but the child's door was cracked. A single shoe was in the hallway, Lucy's, but its laces were tied together, knotted tight, sitting in a puddle of something dark and sticky. She went in. The bedroom was freezing. All the windows were closed, but the curtains were swaying slightly. The smell of damp soil filled the room. At the foot of the bed was a feather. Pure white. Not fluffy but stiff, and cold to the touch. She threw it away in the kitchen trash. But it was back the next night, and the next, and then came the knocks. Always at 3:13 a.m. 3 of them. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the inside of the wall just behind her bed. She pressed her ear to the plaster once, just to prove it was a pipe, maybe a raccoon. Instead she heard breathing. Then a child's voice. "She's not buried right." Megan jerked away. The rest of the night she sat on the porch watching the cemetery. She couldn't explain it, but something was changing. The headstones never seemed to be in the same place. Sometimes the large one under the oak tree was visible from the porch. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes the tree itself leaned just a little closer. By dawn, Megan had decided to call the town office. She asked for cemetery records. The clerk on the phone was quiet for too long. "Ma'am," he said, "are you sure you're living at 291 Briar Hollow?" "Yes." "I didn't know anyone was still in that house." "What do you mean still?" The man cleared his throat. "No one stayed more than a season since the Marlowe girl went missing." Megan froze. "Who?" "You'd have to check with the paper," he said. "But I remember that name. Little girl. Vanished back in '89. Last seen on your front porch." Megan hung up. That night, she placed salt across the door frame of Lucy's room. She woke at 3:13 a.m. to find all the salt swept into a perfect circle on the hardwood floor. And in the center of it, a white feather. Megan didn't sleep after that. She sat up in bed with every light on, clutching the baby monitor like it was holy. Lucy slept through the night for the first time in days, curled beneath a heavy quilt in Megan's bed. But the circle of salt, disturbed again by invisible hands, still glowed under the hallway light. By morning, the feather had vanished. She checked the trash. Nothing. The broom closet. Nothing. She even pulled open every drawer in the kitchen, searching for some logical explanation. She found none. But she did find something else. Behind the radiator in the hallway, tucked flat between the baseboard and the wall, was a photograph. Yellowed, creased in one corner. It showed the front of the house from decades ago. But it wasn't empty. There was a girl standing on the porch, barefoot, pale, her head tilted slightly as if listening. And she was holding something, a small stuffed bear missing an ear. Megan flipped the photo over. Faded ink scratched across the back in shaky cursive. J. Marlowe, spring 1989. That name again. Marlowe, the missing girl. That evening, Megan drove to the Cedar Hill Library. The building was barely more than a one-room schoolhouse. The town's archives were kept in a dusty corner near a broken copy machine. She searched by hand, going through newspaper reels and clippings yellowed with age. It didn't take long to find the article. Local child disappears, no trace found. April 11, 1989. 6-year-old Josie Marlowe was last seen by neighbors playing on the porch of 291 Briar Hollow Road. Her mother reported her missing when she failed to return home for supper. Authorities searched the area for 2 weeks. The only item recovered was her favorite stuffed bear, found beneath the front porch steps. That night, Megan asked Lucy what she remembered about the woman on the porch. Lucy was coloring on the floor, quietly tracing the outline of a tree with black crayon. She said her name was Josie, Lucy replied without looking up. Megan froze. She told you her name? Lucy nodded. She says the people under the ground don't sleep right. They whisper too loud. The lights flickered, then went out. A loud creak echoed upstairs. Megan grabbed the flashlight and walked slowly toward the stairwell, heart hammering in her throat. She stopped at the base of the stairs. 3 footprints, wet, trailed down from Lucy's room. Small. Bear. She turned and ran to Lucy, scooping her up from the floor. "We're sleeping in the car tonight," she said. But the car wouldn't start. The engine made a dry clicking sound, then silence. She turned the key again. Nothing. Just the wind, rising through the trees and over the cemetery like a distant, angry breath. Megan grabbed her phone. Dead. No signal. She turned the flashlight back on, but the beam was dimmer now. That's when she saw it. On the far side of the living room, just past the fireplace, was a long vertical mirror that had come with the house. She hadn't paid much attention to it before. It was dusty, cracked in one corner, and leaned too far back to be useful. But now, something was wrong with it. Her reflection wasn't moving right. She stepped closer. In the mirror, her arm moved just a beat too slow. She tilted her head, but her reflection didn't follow. It stared, then smiled. Not her smile. A child's. And standing next to her, inside the mirror but nowhere else, was a girl in a tattered white dress, holding a stuffed bear by its ear. She looked straight at Megan. Then she whispered something against the glass. Megan leaned closer, her breath fogging the cracked surface. "Say it again," she said. "I didn't hear you." The girl opened her mouth, wide. Too wide. A scream erupted from inside the mirror. The flashlight exploded in Megan's hand, popping with a burst of sparks. Lucy screamed. Megan grabbed her and backed away, dragging her toward the front door. She yanked it open. Outside, the wind had stopped. Everything was still. But in the darkness of the porch, a dozen small white feathers floated slowly down like ash. She slammed the door shut. Back inside, Megan searched the house for anything that might explain what was happening. In the kitchen drawer beneath the old wall phone, she found a rusted tin box. Inside, more photographs. More of Josie. In the backyard. In the hallway. In what used to be Lucy's room. One photo showed her standing in front of the mirror. Her hand was pressed against it. And in the reflection, clear as daylight, there was a second hand pressed back from the other side. Megan dropped the photo. Then she heard it again. From the vent behind the refrigerator, 3 knocks. She stepped closer, held her breath. Then a voice, soft and wet, whispered, "They buried her wrong." The whisper hung in the air like mold. They buried her wrong. Megan stared at the vent. There was no wind, no voice, just the ticking of the kitchen clock and Lucy's breathing, shallow and fast. Megan backed away slowly, scooped her daughter into her arms, and locked them both in the bathroom. She dialed 911. No signal. Of course. She held Lucy in the tub, rocking her gently, whispering stories she barely remembered from childhood. Anything to fill the silence. But the silence had changed. It was thick now, pressurized, like the house itself was holding its breath. Then the knock came. Not on the door. From inside the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Megan pulled the shower curtain closed and held her daughter tight. Her eyes shut, hands trembling. Then a second knock, closer this time, on the wall just behind her head. Lucy sat up. She's back. No, baby. Nobody's here. She says she doesn't like being under there. Under where? Lucy didn't answer. She just pointed down, through the floor. The next morning, Megan drove Lucy to her sister's house 2 towns away. She didn't explain. Just said, "We're having bad dreams. I need her out of that place." Then Megan returned alone. She needed to finish this. She started with the graveyard. Cedar Hill Cemetery was a patch of land that felt older than time. Moss-covered stones, angel statues with broken wings, crypts sealed in rusted iron gates. A small office sat near the entrance, barely a shed, where the records were kept. The man behind the desk wore glasses with cracked lenses and didn't look up when she entered. "Looking for someone?" he asked. "Yes, a child. Josie Marlowe." He shuffled a few drawers, pulled out a brittle logbook. "Marlowe? Yeah. Buried in '89. But what?" He looked up at her for the first time. It was an unofficial burial. No headstone. Family couldn't afford it. Placed her in the family plot, no vault. No vault. He nodded. Means she wasn't sealed. Just lowered into the dirt. Old method. Some folks say the dead don't sleep right unless they're boxed proper. "Where is she?" The man hesitated. "Corner of section C, near the willows. But if you're smart, miss, you'll leave her alone. Some things don't like being remembered." Megan left anyway. The plot was almost invisible, just a patch of overgrown weeds in the corner of the cemetery. But as she knelt near the roots of a twisted willow tree, she felt it, warmth. The ground, despite the cool wind, was warm, vibrating faintly, as if something below was stirring. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Josie. I didn't know." And the wind replied. It moaned through the trees in a voice not quite human, and she felt it behind her, not a person but a shape, watching. When she turned, nothing was there. But that night she dreamed. She was back in the house, standing in the hallway. The mirror at the end of the corridor was polished, gleaming, too bright. She stepped toward it and saw Josie. Not a ghost. A girl. Alive. Crying. Reaching. Behind her, shadows moved. Countless hands stretched out of the walls, grabbing, clawing, pulling the child back into the dark. "No!" Megan screamed. "Leave her alone." She woke up gasping. But something had changed. On the floor beside the bed was a photograph that hadn't been there before. A new one. This time, Josie wasn't alone. 5 figures stood in the background. Thin. Hollow-eyed. Wearing what looked like funeral clothes. And they were smiling. The back of the photo read, "She wasn't the first." Megan didn't sleep again. Instead, she opened every drawer, every cupboard, every hidden spot in the house. And that's when she found it. Beneath the staircase was a hatch, covered by old carpet, nailed down. She pried it up with a kitchen knife and opened the door. It led to a crawl space, low, damp, musty. She climbed in with a flashlight and crawled 10 feet until she found it, a rotting wooden box. Inside were old toys, dolls with no eyes, a broken baby rattle, a stuffed bear, its neck ripped, and dozens of photos. Every single one showed a different child, each of them standing in the house, each of them alone. But in the background, always the same figure, a girl in white. Not Josie, someone else, older. Megan dropped the flashlight. As she reached to grab it, her hand brushed something cold. Fingers, a hand, reaching out from the dirt floor. She screamed and scrambled back, hitting her head on the ceiling beam. The flashlight flickered. A voice whispered right next to her ear, "You opened the house. Now we're all awake." She bolted out, slammed the hatch shut, and backed into the corner, hyperventilating. They weren't just haunting the house. They were in it, alive in ways she didn't understand, waiting for something, waiting for her. And then she remembered what Lucy had said. They whispered too loud. The next morning, Megan drove to the public library. She needed answers, about Josie, about the house, about Cedar Hill. The woman at the archive desk was kind but hesitant. "You're not the first person to come asking about that property," she said, flipping through yellowed city records and newspaper microfilms. "Strange place. Bad history. It used to be owned by a midwife, back in the 1800s. Lillian Graves. Ever heard of her? Megan shook her head. She ran a sort of birthing house, the woman continued. Unwed mothers, poor girls, black and immigrant women with nowhere else to go. They came here to have their babies in secret. But something went wrong. Rumors spread that the children were disappearing. No birth records. No baptisms. No graves. Megan felt her stomach twist. Eventually, the woman said, lowering her voice, the town came for her. They said Lillian was keeping the babies. Or worse, that she was burying them under the house. The story goes that she cursed the land with her final breath, said she'd never leave until every one of them was returned. Megan leaned in, whispering, returned where? The woman paused, then answered softly, to her. That night, Megan stood at the edge of the hatch under the stairs with a lantern in one hand and a hammer in the other. The house was silent, too silent. Not the kind of silence you get when nothing's happening, but the kind that waits, holding its breath. The crawlspace yawned open beneath her, the air inside stale and damp like something had been sleeping there for years. She dropped into the space, crawled forward, and stopped at the box of old toys and photographs. There was something else she hadn't noticed before, another tunnel. Narrow, hand-carved, almost child-sized. It ran deeper, under the foundation. Megan hesitated, then pushed forward. The dirt was damp. Her shoulders scraped against the walls. But she kept crawling. 10 feet in, then 20. At 30 feet, the tunnel widened and opened into a small chamber. The floor was packed earth. The ceiling bowed low. At the center sat a ring of children's belongings, stuffed animals, blocks, little shoes, all laid out like an altar. And in the middle of that ring, drawn in ash, was a spiral. Black, thick, and still smoldering. Megan stared, her breath fogging in the light. Then she heard it, singing. Soft, broken, like a lullaby hummed by someone who had forgotten the tune. It came from the wall. She turned slowly, shining the light at the far end of the chamber. A figure was standing there. She was barefoot, dressed in yellowing linen, her eyes sunken, lips moving in that off-key song. Her hair hung in ropes. Her hands, long-fingered and gray, cradled something Megan couldn't quite see. Who are you? Megan whispered. The woman lifted her face. You brought them home, she said, her voice like dry leaves. They were waiting. Behind her, the wall pulsed. Hands began to push through the dirt, small ones. Children's hands. Reaching. Clawing. Dozens of them. No, I didn't bring anyone, Megan stammered. They heard your child, the woman hissed. She opened the way. Megan backed away, heart slamming. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. The woman stepped forward, still holding the invisible thing in her arms. You saw her in the mirror, didn't you? She doesn't belong in the earth. Not yet. But the others, they do. They're trapped between the floorboards and the dirt, between the birth and the burial. Megan shook her head. This house, it isn't just haunted. It's a tomb. They buried her wrong, the woman repeated, voice rising. No name. No vault. She's not sealed. And until she is, they'll all stay hungry. Megan turned and crawled as fast as she could, back through the tunnel, lungs burning, dirt choking her mouth. She pulled herself out of the hatch, slammed it shut, and collapsed in the hallway. That night she dreamed again. This time she wasn't alone. She stood in the hallway, the mirror at the end reflecting not her, but the house. Not how it was, but how it had been. A hallway of blood-stained wood. Cots lining the walls. Women screaming. And in the distance, Lillian Graves singing her broken lullaby. She turned and found Lucy standing beside her, staring into the mirror. They want to come up, her daughter said. Megan reached out, but Lucy stepped forward and placed her palm against the glass. A child's handprint appeared on the other side. Then another. Then dozens. I can't stop them, Lucy whispered. But you can. Megan woke up with a jolt. The house groaned. Something was moving in the walls. She knew now what she had to do. The next day, Megan didn't send Lucy to school. She sat her down at the kitchen table and asked her gently, when you talk to them, what do they say? Lucy looked down at her cereal. They say they're cold, and that they miss their names. She paused. One of them said you were going to help. Megan nodded slowly. She had already begun preparing. She called into work and left a message with the Historical Society, asking for old blueprints of the property. Then she headed to the hardware store. Shovels, candles. Her movements were automatic, fueled by something between desperation and resolve. That evening, she stood in the yard with a lantern in her hand, Lucy watching silently from the porch swing. Megan didn't know where to dig, but Lucy did. There, she pointed, beneath the old elm tree. Its roots were gnarled, splitting the ground like veins. Megan began to dig. She dug for hours. The soil was thick and black. By midnight she hit wood. A small box, then another, and another. They weren't coffins. Not really. Just crude crates. Some falling apart with rot, others wrapped in canvas. Megan opened one carefully and a cry escaped her throat. A tiny bundle of bones wrapped in stained cloth, a rattle still clutched in its brittle hand. She wept. All night she dug. By dawn she had uncovered 12 boxes. She called the police but didn't give her name. She just told them, "There are graves here. Unmarked. Children." Then she hung up. That afternoon the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Megan sat with Lucy on the porch as city officials arrived. Coroners, crime scene tape, camera crews. They took over the yard. But the real weight still sat inside. That night, Megan lit candles in every room. She opened every window. And she waited. It didn't take long. Voices rose through the floorboards, soft, pleading, childlike. From the vents, from behind the mirrors, from the attic and the crawl space. They weren't screams anymore. They were sighs. Breaths of relief. As if the house itself was exhaling after holding something in for too long. Then Megan heard her. Lillian Graves. At the bottom of the stairs, in her funeral white dress, holding that invisible bundle, eyes wide with centuries of grief. "You returned them," Lillian said. Megan stood firm. "I buried them." Lillian stepped forward. Her face cracked into something close to a smile. "Then I can go now." Behind her, the mirror rippled. And from the glass, hands reached out, not in fear but in farewell. The children. Dozens of them. Their reflections watched as Megan nodded, her throat tight. "Go," she whispered. And one by one the images faded. When Megan woke the next morning, the house was silent, but this time it felt right. No more creaks. No more whispers. Just stillness. She walked to the backyard. The city had already cordoned off the site. Lucy followed quietly, still holding the drawing she had made the night before. A big oak tree with faces in the roots and candles in the dirt. At the base of the tree, a plaque had been placed overnight. Temporary. But it said, "In memory of the forgotten children, may they finally rest." 2 weeks later, Megan received a letter from the city. They declared the property historic. Plans were in motion to exhume and reinter the remains in a proper cemetery. Cedar Hill. The same place where the voices had first called out. Felt right. On the morning of the reburial, Megan dressed Lucy in her Sunday best and drove to the ceremony. The sky was gray but not threatening. The crowd was small. City officials, local historians, a few clergy members. 12 child-sized caskets were placed in a row, each wrapped in white, each finally named. The priest spoke softly. They were not lost, only waiting to be found. When it was over, Megan and Lucy stayed behind. As the others left, Megan approached one of the fresh headstones. It read, Josie Graves, 1891 to 1891. Megan knelt beside it, brushing her fingers over the name. The air was cool but gentle. She whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Lucy stood beside her and tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," she said, "do you hear that?" Megan frowned. "What?" But then she did. A breeze, gentle like a song half remembered, and the tiniest voice. "Thank you." That night they returned home. The lights no longer flickered. The mirror no longer rippled. The house at last was only a house. But every year on Josie's birthday, Megan lights 12 candles by the elm tree. And every year, just before midnight, the air changes. Not cold, not haunted, just full. Full of something sacred, of peace. And if you walk quietly through Cedar Hill Cemetery, you might still hear the voices. But now they're singing lullabies,